Well, listen, they started throwing the towers up when we were all locked indoors. So it's a global problem now, especially in the more developed countries. The UK, I mean, they're on every street corner now. And I saw it in Florida when I was there. It's a very common thing nowadays that we have to deal with. So you do a lot of work with farmers, and set the scene for us because of the changes to our society and the technologies we've introduced, farmers basically found themselves with more problems. So jump into what those problems are and then implementing your technology and what the results been. And I think this is really important because there's no placebo with cows, right? They can't fake it. It's the same with babies, right? So, if you give a baby a homeopathic, right, which you've given our son occasionally, you can't fake it. It is what it is. So yeah, jump into that in terms of your work with the farmers.
Yeah, this has been super rewarding because one of the things that we want to do is help people live healthier and more vibrant lives. And one of the best ways to do that is to help with the food supply. With farmers, we see with their animals and their crops are more pest resistant, they're more drought resistant because there's more vitality, more life force in them. And when we started getting calls from these dairy farmers in 2019 and 2020, basically the same problem across the country. Didn't matter where they were all having the same problem. Their cows weren't going into heat. They weren't getting pregnant. The fertility issues were dropping. And on a lot of these family farms, smaller scale farms, their next calf is the future income, the future milk producer for them. And so this was putting a lot of farms at risk. And they were really struggling because a lot of these farms were rural. Maybe you couldn't even see a cell tower, the power lines. And so for them to think that they had an EMF problem was really foreign. They couldn't really connect the dots. But at the same time, we started to have Starlink and other satellite communication systems being put out there right around 2019 and 2020. So the environment was changing. The atmosphere was changing. And that's where these cows live. So they're calling me saying, hey, I'm having fertility issues. I'm having production issues. The milk is starting to change its taste. It's less creamy, less quality. What can we do? And I said, well, we know that EMF affects fertility. There are so many studies that show, in fact, there's one from 2018 that shows with the NIH, and then there was an Italian group, the Ramizzi Institute, that showed that male fertility was affected and they had cancer in their rats as well. So we know that fertility is affected by EMF in people and in animals. And I said, look, let's get our Geofield Conditioner on your farm and let's just watch what happens. We have a 90-day return policy on those. So 90 days, risk-free, we can try that. It was incredible. All these farmers had a complete turnaround within a month and a half. All their cows started going back into heat. They all got pregnant on their first round they went through. And they called me up and say, I think we saved the farm. And downstream from that, then they started to see their pastures had more chlorophyll. They were more nutrient dense. They had species forming in those pastures that they hadn't had in years. So they could tell their soil was healthier. And that was leading to a better production, better product at the end. Their milk was better. In fact, one farmer called me and said he had customers calling him saying, man, what did you change? What's different? Because this milk is creamier, it's thicker, it's just better, and so real world experience, real life experience, and pretty fast change as well.
Yeah, for sure. And here's the thing, farmers, they know their cows, they know their farms, they know when things start to go good or bad, and just to see all of those changes so quickly is just fascinating.
We were actually talking at a conference in, I think it was October of 2 years ago. And I talked about the issues of EMF and how it affects farms. And this farmer came up, or I actually didn't know who she was. She just came up with her checkbook and said, I want that right now. I'm going to write you a check. I said, well, they're not cheap. Are you sure? Tell me about your farm. He says, no, I have a 4,000 cow dairy and we are converting it from a traditional, conventional farm into organic, grass-fed, because my mom, and this is how it happened. Her mom went through cancer, and she went alternative, did a natural approach, overcame the cancer, totally healed from that. And one of the big things was that she was drinking raw milk. And they realized that the milk they were producing from their dairy, they couldn't drink it raw. Like it wouldn't work. They needed to change the way they produced it. So they were converting their dairy over, and they knew that EMFs were a big issue. So we brought it in there, and the neat thing is this dairy, women are working in milking parlor. You know, it just is a great feel, great energy on this dairy. And they saw their milk increase by 15%. All the stress on their cows came down, fertility improved. I mean, it happens whether you have a dairy with 30 cows or with 4,000, which tells you that we're dealing with a universal problem. And if it works well for the farms, and we have homeowners who are buying those same units because they want to benefit their neighborhood. These same products work great in the home because it is an environmental issue that we're dealing with. It's not a specific issue of what's happening in England isn't going to work here in Florida or Washington State. It's a global issue that we're dealing with and we're getting to solve.